Good Monday morning, everyone. Today is February 3rd, 2020, and here is your Monday Morning Minute. So for today, we will recap last week's readings, talking about positive student-student relationships. We'll then transition to thinking about positive parent/community/teacher relationships. And then I'll talk about a couple upcoming assignments. We have our third critical response due this week. And then 2 weeks from today, we have our first summative assessment, which is our teaching metaphor project. So thinking back to the importance of building student-student relationships, there are a lot of really interesting ideas that cropped up in our posts this week, and I realized that you know each other's work since there's only two of us in the class, but just some ideas that I wanted to highlight. First from Doug, who writes, "My hope is that I can create an environment of inclusion in which everyone feels comfortable. Personally, I tend to be drawn to the unique personality types and try to emphasize independent thinking. Much more difficult with older students in my experience. You would think that tolerance is a skill that is developed with maturity. Anyway, in my world, it is so important to feel safe or comfortable and is the first step to be able to take some chances and engage in active learning." Doug, you have a really unique classroom setup that I think will be fascinating to unpack and explore, even when we talk this week about how to involve parents and community members, especially for some of your students who are adults and who are not relying on their parents necessarily. But I think that what you're saying here holds true, right? No matter the age, whether it's pre-K, whether it's a SPED classroom like Caitlin has, whether it's a continuing education classroom, we all need to feel safe and comfortable. You know, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think comes up maybe later on this course, and hopefully it's an idea that you've encountered before, right? But feeling physically safe, and I would say emotionally safe as well, is a prerequisite to attaining higher levels of learning. So Doug, thanks for the reminder that needs to happen at all levels of education. And Caitlin writes, "When I first started as a SPED teacher, I always wondered why, while in evaluation, the psychologists looked so deeply into the student's interactions with other students and why it had anything to do with how the student reads. It wasn't until I gained more knowledge that I learned that those relationships will truly impact how a student feels about school, and it can also affect how a student performs academically." Yes, absolutely. And I think, again, Jones and Jones in their infinite wisdom did a good job of laying out why exactly these peer relationships are so critical, right? The safety piece is certainly one. But building on that safety piece, we can also look at the academic piece. And if a student doesn't feel as though they're accepted by their peers, that school is a safe place, how can we expect them to perform at the levels that they need to, right? So coming up this week, we'll be talking about developing positive parent and community and teacher relationships. And we should also be careful when we use the term parent, as I know I've already done in this video a couple of times, just because, you know, recognizing that not all of our students live with their biological parents, right? Many live with guardians, aunts, uncles, maybe brothers and sisters, maybe grandparents as well. So Jones and Jones usually use the term caregiver, which I think is appropriate here. But how can we kind of extend our outreach and ensure that the caregivers of our students, the folks that support them, also feel as though they are a part of the student's educational process, right? Which they are. They're just often underutilized, as Jones and Jones talk about. So the key question here is, how do we create trust between teachers and family members? And there's so much good advice here that I'm interested to hear you all reflect on. So Jones and Jones tell us that we need to focus on listening rather than telling. And to that end, Joyce Epstein, she starts with a quote. It's kind of on the introductory page of chapter 5. And she writes, "The way schools care about children is reflected in the way schools care about the children's families." I don't know about you all. I've worked in school environments where parents are kind of positioned, parents and caregivers, I should say, are positioned as sort of the enemy. They're sort of viewed as oppositional to the work that we're trying to do in the school. And I think Epstein's quote brings up the question of, you know, if we're viewing the folks who care most about students as the enemy, how can we possibly have productive relationships with the students, right? And again, that's just an interesting kind of school level rumination to consider, and maybe think about your own educational environments and, how does the school position families in relation to your educational goals? Jones and Jones also note that, of course, reaching out to parents, especially if you have, 100 students every year or more, takes a lot of time. But I think they lay out a compelling case about why, a significant amount of time, yes, on the front end really yields so many benefits and can save time in the long run. We have a video this week also from Victoria Purcell Gates, an excellent researcher when we're talking about equity and the importance of family in the public education process. And so Victoria Purcell Gates, in this really brief clip, says at one point, a teacher as a learner needs to go out to the parents, right? We can't expect parents to always come to us. And also, I think Jones and Jones talk about cultural differences that sometimes preclude parents from seeing their role as one in which they are supposed to go out to the school. And they're supposed to be following up on what their students are doing and helping with their homework, etc. So we need to have some cultural humility. And that comes when we actually meet with the parents, when we learn, when we keep an open mind. And building on that idea too, mentioned in Jones and Jones, and I would highly suggest tracking down this piece on your own, it's this concept of funds of knowledge. So often, and maybe some of us are guilty of it, I certainly was guilty of this type of talk before I learned better, but often when we talk about our students, we talk about them from a deficit perspective, meaning we talk about them based on what they lack. Like, they don't have a good home life. They don't have, these particular skills. They don't have, right? And what Mall and others have sort of like flipped the script about is talking about, actually, these students, even though, in terms of academic literacies, there are these like areas of need, there's also a lot that students bring to the table that we don't acknowledge. And they call these their funds of knowledge. So I challenge you this week and for the rest of your education career to consider the funds of knowledge approach. So anytime that you are tempted to be like, well, this student doesn't have blank, think about, well, what do they have? What funds of knowledge do they bring that could perhaps be leveraged in pursuit of an academic goal? So just, again, an interesting sort of reversal of how a lot of us think. All right, I do want to talk briefly about our upcoming assignment. It's the Teaching Metaphor Project. I'm going to navigate, that's the word. It's early. I'm going to navigate over to our Blackboard and try to make sure that within this window you can see what's happening. Okay. So here I am at assignments. You just click on the Teaching Metaphor Project. Let me adjust the windows again. All right. And I know that this view is a little small, so you won't be able to see everything. But I do encourage you to look at this on your own. So essentially here, what I'm asking you to do is to come up with a metaphor that speaks to your own view of teaching and learning. And the idea here, I start off with some quotes from Lakoff and Johnson, who talk about these conceptual metaphors that we use all the time, that we often don't pay attention to, and how they're actually very, very important, and they help to explain our actions. So again, a metaphor, if you need a refresher, it's kind of comparing two unlike things, but you're showing that there's a similarity between them. And I want you to be thoughtful about this metaphor because, again, this suggests how you approach classroom management, right? You're thinking about teaching and learning. And so with this metaphor, you'll want to think, does your metaphor frame teaching, learning positively or negatively? How are you positioned in this metaphor? Do you have agency in this metaphor? And how are your students positioned in this metaphor? Are they just, beings to whom education is done? Do they have any agency or power or say in the educative process? What does this metaphor suggest about how you might approach conflicts in this work, right? Thinking about classroom management specifically. And also, what does your metaphor suggest is the goal of education? Now I give here a counterexample, and this is one that I've heard teachers talk about. So let's say that your metaphor is teaching and learning. Teaching is putting out fires. Clearly there's a negative connotation there, right? And it certainly doesn't frame the students well. The students, I suppose, would be the fires in this situation, right, that you are constantly putting out. It also just suggests that the teacher's role is kind of chaotic, right? Just kind of keeping a lid on everything. Nothing about growth, nothing about enthusiasm. And again, if those are important qualities to you, maybe this putting out fires metaphor is not for you. And then when you have this metaphor, I'm asking you to create a visual essay that addresses kind of all of these questions and just tells me a little bit about sort of the genesis of your idea. So I'm asking for 600 to 1,000 words. Include some images too. That should be easy when you come up with your metaphor. Again, address the questions posed above. Please also incorporate, I'd say 3 to 5 readings. Maybe think about this as like at least 3 to 5 quotes from what we've read so far. It'd be ideal if it was a variety of sources, but we've mostly stuck to the Jones and Jones text, so that's fine too. Here's the grading sheet. And then finally, I've linked here to a couple examples of some teaching metaphors. If you want to use one of these, that's fine. I would just hope that you could kind of put your own spin on it. So let me navigate over a little bit. Okay, it's from the website Teaching Tolerance. Okay, so navigating back. This is the page that it'll take you to. You'll just want to scroll down, and then here are some videos. Here's one. Oh wait, actually, scroll down a little bit further towards the very bottom. Here we go. So here is one. It's a tailoring metaphor, teaching as tailoring. And then here's one about teaching as a greenhouse. So again, those are kind of ideas for you if it's helpful. Okay. Of course, if you have questions, let me know. And we do have some lead time on this. I just wanted to sort of plant the seed to take a look at those assignment materials and make sure you understand the assignment. And of course, so we have some time if you'd like to talk a little bit more. Okay, so for this week, we have our third critical response. Your initial post will be due Thursday, February 6th, and then follow-up posts by Sunday the 9th. And here's your optional prompt, if you'd like. And this is based on one of the checkpoints, I think, in Jones & Jones, one of their suggested activities. I've modified it a bit. But I'd like you to think of a situation in which you have been or imagine being confronted by an upset caregiver. How might you use some of the ideas and concepts brought up in Chapter 5 of Jones & Jones to ensure that the encounter is productive and positive? And so just something to think about and optionally reflect on if you'd like. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about Chapter 5 of Jones & Jones. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm always available via email. All right, cheers.